Good morning and welcome to Witchin' Wednesday. This is the space we are cultivating where we once a week check in to learn a little bit, talk about some esoteric topics. Today I have for you sovereignty and the path of the witch as a path that leads you away from dogma and towards your own authentic truth. It's going to be kind of a brave discussion today. Definitely hope that it helps those of you who are trying to unburden yourself of years of dogmatic thinking, and helps to be a light and a support to those of you who are walking an authentic path but feeling isolated along it. So, that being said, I think I'd just like to begin with a simple card pull. I absolutely love this deck. Shameless plug. I'm not being paid to advertise it. I just love it. Sacred Rebels Oracle is Alana Fairchild. She is, I wish she would write, because I feel like every one of her decks, the book gets bigger and bigger and bigger. The meaty bits that are in each of these individual cards can be a lot to digest at times. However, I think that there's some really powerful wisdom in here. Definitely not, for your 5-minute check-in. It's definitely take some time with the cards that you pull. Allow it to be a practice and a ceremony. I actually got 3 cards here. Interesting. So, and it's funny because these came up in ceremony earlier this week as well. So this deck is really speaking at this time of year. So we have card 13, Power of Attraction. We have card 21, Beyond the Mind, the Heart Beats. And card 34, In the World, Not of the World. So Power of Attraction really speaks to authenticity. So there's this struggle that they say that we go through. It's in the psychological literature, for authenticity versus approval. So this is kind of a stage that we go through in our development where we ultimately have a need. Fundamentally, it's hardwired into our brain. Our species has survived as long as it has based on a community structure. So we're hardwired, like it's inescapable. As much as you might suffer from misanthropic tendencies, we are dependent on community for our continued survival. Try too hard to do everything on your own, and you might just experience a setback that lets you know exactly how much we are fundamentally reliant on those in our surroundings and how important it is to cultivate community. But back to the struggle of authenticity versus approval, we often have a hard time based on this fundamental need for community. We have a hard time with looking for approval and feeling like our fundamental self is being rejected. So when we feel that in our community that we need for survival, that our fundamental self is not accepted, what we will have a tendency to do is to mask, to alienate ourselves from our own authentic self, and to do that in order to gain external approval. So it is a, fundamentally it's a manipulation tactic. It's a control tactic. When we feel that we do not have control over how we are received in community, we can kind of assert that control by observing what other people are doing and assuming what it is that they want, and then contorting ourselves to be that thing that we perceive that our community, our surroundings needs and wants us to be. Sometimes people will have the kindness to tell you, they give you lots of unsolicited advice about how you should be different. But ultimately, this struggle of authenticity versus approval is encouraging us to realize that there is no approval that you receive through manipulation and control tactics, where you say, yes, I can control my reception in community and how well I'm received by altering myself, by shape shifting, by contorting myself in order to belong in this space. There's these very clearly laid out rules for how I should behave. And if I just do those things to the letter of the law, well, then I will be good and I will be accepted and I will be acceptable and my needs for community are met. Ultimately, you realize that when you're sacrificing your authenticity and sacrificing yourself in order to meet those expectations, in order to gain that approval, that you end up not feeling approved of at all. It's the ultimate disapproval. It's the disapproval of self. It's a subconscious shame that says that there's something fundamentally flawed about my authentic being. No one will like me. No one will want to be around me. No one will accept me. So I must push away my authenticity and who I am and what I want and be this pale shadow of all that I could be in order to have my needs met. So this card, what it speaks to is abandoning that entire struggle, is recognizing that the only approval that we need is the acceptance and love and approval of self, our authentic self. That when we are standing in truth and standing in authenticity, that we are attracting the best community and the best people for ourselves. Actually, I heard something recently that talks about, so we now have the ability to actually observe and measure. Our technology is sensitive enough to observe the magnetic field that is generated by the electrical activity in our heart. And there's this whole, and you can go to heartmath.org. It's a nice website that kind of teaches you about this, but when our heart is beating in love, it is magnetic. It generates a large magnetic field. It many times stronger magnetic field is generated by truth, by authenticity. So we are actually literally and figuratively drawing our aligned community and surroundings to ourselves every time we stand in our truth, stand in our power, and stand in our authenticity. So there is no real struggle between authenticity versus approval. There is just the understanding that the only approval that you need is the approval of self, is the acceptance of self. You come into relationship with that authentic self and you generate more approval and more support and more community, many, many times more when you are authentic. And that anytime we abandon our authenticity in favor of what we perceive as the approval that we need, the approval that we receive is going to fall flat. We're going to feel like we've sold out, we've sold ourselves, enter in depression, apathy, anxiety, all of these other indicators that we are off path and off track. So ultimately, anything that asks you to abandon pieces of yourself, to step away from yourself, and to be something else that somebody else would like you to be, is something that takes you away from your health, that takes you away from your personal power, that takes you away from your ability to generate the type of community and the type of support that you actually fundamentally need. That being said, we move into this next card, Beyond the Mind, the Heart Beats, which is a fabulous, fabulous, fabulous card that literally keeps you in mind that as much as we might want to overthink things, as much as we might want to have a rational linear thought process that says, if A, then B, then C, that isn't always effective and that isn't always best. So our kind of rational thoughts, our mindset is the newest development in our brains. It's this region up here, right? It's the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for executive functioning and all of that busy mind stuff that we experience and that we kind of have identified with ourself. We identify with the thoughts in our mind as though those are us, as though the rest of us is irrelevant, is a machine. However, for hundreds of thousands of years, as best we can tell, we were developing and operating on systems that didn't even include that part of our brains, right? There are as many neurons in your gut as there are in the brain of a dog. So your intestines, your intestinal tract is as intelligent as a dog. If you have dogs or have spent time around dogs, you know that there is an intelligence to them. Sometimes they can be kind of stupid and roll and poop and stuff like that, but you know what? That's it cannot be argued that they retain enough intellectual function to survive independently as a species, let alone the neurons that are in your heart, let alone the neurons that are in every other organ in your body. You're a whole system. You aren't simply the executive up here that has a lot to say and a lot of bossing around to do. So this card talks about that sometimes we can't understand why. We don't always know. Sometimes you have to surrender the mind and just say, I don't understand why, but I know that. I feel it in my bones. My heart can lead the way. So you might have instances where, moving back to your authenticity, where you have to sacrifice approval in order to remain in your authenticity, and you may not be able to convince your brain that that's the logical tract, that that's the thing to do, but your heart knows. Your heart always knows. Your heart is always leading the way. Your heart is unerringly, magnetically drawing you towards the best future and the best outcome for you, the best community for you, the best environment for you. And sometimes, though we cannot know how or why or when, that we cannot intellectualize our way through this experience, we have to trust that there is wisdom in our heart, that our hearts and our guts and the mammalian and reptilian parts of our brains have been leading us true for untold centuries, and that it is not always better for something to make sense. And sometimes you have to just set the thinking aside and just do what feels right, and then trust and have faith that that is and always will be the very best thing for you to do. And then it says, the next card, in the world, not of the world. It really talks about being the energy that alters the room instead of being altered by the energy in the room. So bring your truth, bring your authenticity, understand that it is radiant, magnetic, and powerful, and that you don't need to shapeshift yourself to fit in with this room. You don't need to follow the crowd. The crowd are lost. They're very, very lost. I mean, look around. They're lost. We don't need to do what is done. We don't need to do what others do. And we don't need to follow the path well-traveled. The path well-traveled leads to war, famine, death, disease, right? The path well-traveled is a notable disaster piece. So when you are finding your authenticity and you are being radiant and you are being magnetic, understand that you are here in the world to contribute that energy to the world. You are here to bring that love, to bring that light, to bring that magnetism. You aren't here to better fit in with the people who are lost. You are here to be a guide and to be a light, right? And so sovereignty is that. It is originally a word that is applied to nations or states. That goes to show that they are not under the authority of your nation. They are operating independently. Typically, when we're speaking of sovereignty, we're talking about personal sovereignty or individual sovereignty, which is that state of being true to yourself, of being whole and complete. We can think in science of volatile molecules, right? So a molecule can become volatile where it will react with other molecules when it is missing an electron in its electron sheath, right? Then anytime it gets near something with excess positive electrons, it comes along and grabs up that positive electron, sometimes explosively. It's a good metaphor because as above, so below, as within, so without. If something is true of life, it's true of life. So look at the ways that that might apply to you. When you're walking around isolating, smothering, and suppressing a piece of yourself, when you are being incomplete and inauthentic, right? Then you are walking around as your own little volatile molecule in this society. You're constantly looking to take from someone else to replace that big hole within. It's this syndrome of the hungry ghost, right? So the hungry ghost is this person, is this soul that is incomplete, that has this hole, that has this vacuum, that has this emptiness inside, constantly trying to fill that. Food, drugs, sex, shopping, anything that you can shove in to feed that emptiness inside, that hungry ghost. And it ends up being a drain and a blight upon society. So ultimately, it is our highest ideal and our highest goal to become complete and sovereign within ourselves, right? To release the need for approval, because that fundamental need for approval is a fundamental vampirism and hunger from society. And when we are complete and when we are whole and when we are vibrating in our authenticity, then we become those with those positive electrons that are extra, right? Or not positive electrons, but the extra electrons. We have more to give. Our cup is full. We can give to society. We can give back to society. I like to remind myself that other people are not entitled to the contents of my cup. That is the essential energy and vitality that is necessary in order to maintain my being. Other people are not entitled to the insides of your cup. Stop giving people the shirt off your back. Now you're frozen and they don't feel shamed of having frozen someone else. Where is their shirt? What happened to their shirt? Did they give the shirt off their back to somebody else on and down the line, right? Give people the extra shirts that you have in your closet. Donate them the extra coats that you have. Be so secure and be so good at caring for yourself that you overflow. Once you are complete and you are magnetic, you will have more than enough to give and to share with others. But when you are giving of what is essential to your cup, you are creating that hungry ghost syndrome within yourself. It is not a service to community for you to become a hungry ghost. It is not a service to community for you to give of what is necessary to maintain your own vitality. You should not create a negative space within yourself hoping that it'll rush back in. Many people will do this. They call it manipulative altruism, which is a really cool word to say that when you go out there and you give to others in such a way that depletes you and you have need and need and need from within, it's not a true service. It's not a true giving. It's a way of manipulating other people to give back to you. I have needs, so I will give, and now you owe me, right? That isn't a healthy and sustainable way to do things. It's a sense of debt and obligation. It's servitude. It's slavery. It's an emotional slavery. There is no payback. It's a life debt. I have done this thing for you and now you owe me forever, indefinitely. That's not altruism. That's manipulation. And people will do that. So be mindful of that. Be cautious of that. Look for that in others and look for that in yourself. Ultimately, all of us need community, and we should have a give and take. We should have reciprocity. We should be receiving in as much as we are offering, and vice versa. So ask yourself, am I doing more taking than I am giving? Am I doing more giving than I am taking? And if you're not sure, look within, look in your heart. Am I feeling depleted? Am I feeling empty? Or do I feel whole and complete? Am I feeling an obligation or am I giving out of gratitude, right? Gratitude can be a wonderful hack to kind of navigate us through these challenges. But coming back to sovereignty can be terrifying in the world that we're in. It can feel like that will be alienating you from the community that you rely on, right? But make sure that the community that you rely on is supporting you in being your most and your best self, and not just indoctrinating you in order to use you to support them, right? So let me find in another word. One of the many problems that I have had with dogmatic religion is that they feel more than comfortable taking and taking and taking and keeping and keeping and keeping and holding and withholding, they'll ask you to come worship in gilded churches in communities where there are people addicted and starving. It's a cognitive dissonance, right? There are the residential schools, right, with horrifying mass graves full of children's bodies who will accept your payments as you walk down the aisle and sell you a story of your redemption and your approval and your belonging in community and your fundamental goodness. And you must walk over the corpses of children to walk into these buildings. So what they are doing is they're selling you a substitute for wholeness and completion. They're selling you a approval that comes from abandoning your authenticity, your power, and your strength. And you have to ask yourself why. You have to ask yourself why. Because it creates a level of dependency, right? It creates compliance. It creates control, right? A population that comes to you for approval, that is dependent upon you, well, that population is going to continue giving you all of their hard-earned money, all of their life, their energy. So there's more. I mean, money is just paper with numbers on it that we've agreed that has a certain value. It's not, doesn't have to hold any real value. It's an IOU note that our government, a thing that we've imagined up and created, says is real. It doesn't actually have any value. But what does have value is you, your energy, your time, your effort, your blood, sweat, and tears. Those have value. The earth that we stand upon, it has value. Our water, it has value. Our communities, our love, our children, they have value. So you're bringing all of your value and all of your worth and all of your offerings to these altars to worship. And they're telling you how you should be, what you should do, how to live your life. And conveniently, all of those things about how you should do, how you should be, how you should live your life, support their economy. So it's a level of spiritual slavery. You are indebted to them in order to earn yourself the afterlife that you desire. Many people play into this. It's in the dynamics of a cult, essentially, up to and including people who would give the ultimate sacrifice of all of the rest of their life energy in the name of the dogma and in the name of the indoctrination. It's really bizarre. It's really a kind of a bizarre thing when you step back and you look at those things. And so it's a good encapsulation of the consequences of abandoning your authenticity for approval. And we can see all the ways when people as a large group abandon their authenticity, the piece of you inside that knows what's right and what's wrong, in favor of the approval of a set of dogma that tells you what's right and what's wrong. Now we have mass genocides. Now we have people proselytizing, coming and knocking on your door and telling you that you're going to go to an imaginary place that no one can prove exists and has never been to and returned from, under penalty of death, right? Now we have the burnings, and we have the holy wars, and we have countless untold atrocities, right? In the name of external approval and in the name of dogma. And so we ask ourselves, should we ever abandon our own authenticity and our own moral compass and our own idea of what is right from wrong in favor of what someone else tells us we should do? Or should we look with discernment at patterns of behavior and patterns of history and ask ourselves, what do we believe in, and what do we value, and what do we virtue, and what do we know is right inside of our hearts and inside of our bones? How can we step outside of the fear-mongering propaganda and actually look with discernment at the world and say, this is not right. This is not acceptable. This is not humane. Historically, we've seen that none of this has led to any absolution or redemption. But that absolution and redemption are in our own hands. that we have our own personal power and our own personal ability to decide for ourselves what we think is right and what we think is wrong, that we can be here in the world and decide not to adopt its perverted and diseased moral values and moral compass. We can decide for ourselves right from wrong. It's not necessarily the easy path. Once again, that persecution. Keep in mind, when you have chosen your own moral compass and your own ideation about what is right and what is wrong, you may become the other, right? There is nothing more threatening to someone who has abandoned themselves in favor of the approval of doing what they know is wrong. There is nothing more threatening to that individual than the idea that there was another choice, that there was another option, that all along they could have done what they knew to be right in their heart and in their soul and in their being, and that they're going to be held accountable for what they did for approval, right? There are many traditions and many beliefs that believe in karma or some variety of karma, that believe in reincarnation, but I think you can look at simple physics, that every action has an equal and opposite reaction, that there is no such thing as absolution. If you drop a stone into water, there will be ripples. No one can stop the ripples. No one can prevent those ripples from happening. A butterfly flaps its wings on one side of the world and there's a tsunami on the other side of the world. There will be an effect for every cause. For every action that you take and every doing that you do, there will be repercussions and there will be a return of that energy. No one can interfere with that. No one can stop that. That is divinely ordained and part of the system that we live in. So I think it's really interesting because people who would like to avoid accountability and responsibility for their actions are often drawn to this kind of idea. Oh, well, you can be forgiven of all your sins. Well, you can forgive yourself, certainly, and you can ask for forgiveness, but you will never circumvent accountability for your actions. You will have to pay the piper eventually in some way or other, even if that's only in the voice in your head that lets you know that you did wrong, in the knowing in your heart that will not let you put yourself out there or try or thrive or re-engage with society or do good deeds, whatever the thing is that is plaguing you, that guilt, that conscience, that voice that says, no, no one can tell you that that thing that you did that was wrong was right or is okay. Sometimes I think we all ultimately have to grapple with things that we've done that were not correct. But it can be kind of beautiful, right? Because when you allow yourself to fully feel that sense of, oh, I have done wrong, I have made a mistake, I have wronged someone else, I have done something, and I own the harm that was wrought by those actions. You may not have absolution, but you can have atonement. You can balance the scales. So ancient Egyptians had you at the end of your life stand before Anubis, the god of the dead, and he had his scales, and the idea was to take your heart, once again your heart, and weigh it against a feather. Our hearts are light when we have atoned and when we have taken accountability. Our hearts are not light when we know in our hearts that what we did was wrong. Our hearts are not right and light when we know what we did was wrong, even though someone else says it's okay. When you've fallen victim to that group think and that mass consciousness, when you're part of a protest that becomes a riot and you're throwing bricks through people's windows and stealing from their small businesses, just because everyone was doing it doesn't make the heart light. Just because in your head you decided, yeah, if I do what everyone is doing, then I will be accepted and approved of by this community, and I will be absolved and I will be forgiven. That doesn't make the heart light, right? It is said that if your heart weighs heavier than the feather, that you are sent back into the wheel, right? You don't get to move on. Your soul doesn't get to be elevated. You're not sent to hell to suffer for eternity. You're returned to earth to atone. Ultimately, we are all here to learn how to do right by others, to learn how to be in this world, but not bogged down by the suffering within it so much that we cannot cast a light. We're here to be the light in the darkness and to shake off the moths, right? There will be moths that will be attracted to your light, and you cannot let them obscure it. You cannot let them snuff it out. You have to be able to stand in here, stand in your power, stand in your truth, stand in your authenticity, and radiate that out into the world. And I think a really many people are drawn to paganism and to witchcraft and to any other shamanic and indigenous traditions from around the world, whether that be from their own cultural background and ethnicity and heritage, or whether that be those of their immediate surroundings that they have available to them to learn. Anything that brings us closer to the earth, and anything that brings us closer to the all that is, and anything that gets us into right relationship with ourselves and with our surroundings, and our understanding of ourselves as just one drop in the ocean. Yes, we are also the ocean in a drop. However, we're only just a piece of this grand puzzle, and that we do not have control over it. We do not have autonomy, not autonomy. We do not have authority over the all. It is more than us, and yet we are within it. And we can surrender to the all in such a way that we know our individual part to play. We know that we have a part to play, that we are just a part of this grand thing that is the all that is, but that we should treat it with respect as we would treat ourselves. We should treat all other beings with the same respect that we would show ourselves. And we should be careful of cancers within our body, just as we should be aware of cancers within our society. Growth, uninhibited growth without boundaries, growth without borders is cancer. The assimilation of all things into one thing is cancer. Cancer might begin in your liver cells, but then you have liver cancer. Now you have liver cells in your heart, liver cells in your brain, liver cells in your muscles, liver cells in your gut. You're not meant to only be a liver. You're meant to be a liver and a heart and lungs and a brain and a gut. When you have homogeny, you have a dead organism, right? So everyone shouldn't believe the same thing, and everyone shouldn't have the same functions. Then there's no one size fits all sort of belief system or spiritual and religious practices that will get all of us to the same wholeness and elevation. It is beautiful, necessary, and life affirming and life giving that we have diversity, right? Diversity in everything, right? And focus more on yourself and your own needs and what works for you than you focus on altering other people, and you'll have a functional organism. It basically comes down to just respect for self and respect for other people. And it comes down to surrendering this kind of thought process that we are the top of the food chain, that we are the embodiment of perfection, that we are these deities walking. It's just this ultimate hubris that says that everything that we don't understand is less intelligent than us. Everything that we cannot subjugate is our lessers. Coming to the humility of understanding that the trees could have consciousness that we don't understand. And that doesn't have anything to do with the lack of intelligence in the trees, and has everything to do with our own lack of intelligence and our own arrogance. That we might surrender to the fact that animals could quite possibly have a better idea of how to survive in this world than we do. That the things that look other and different to the way that we behave aren't necessarily lesser, right? That it could be that us not hearing the dialogue that happens between the bees and the flowers doesn't mean there isn't one, right? That we are not put here to destroy and to use and repurpose everything that was here, but perhaps we were put here to be stewards and to learn and to protect that which we see around us, that we were here to appreciate and explore, that perhaps this whole garden is a classroom for higher learning and development. And perhaps we're much more like children than we are like gods. So there's a level of humility that comes into respecting the natural order and finding our place within it. It's not for everyone. Not everyone has the time, personality, or wherewithal to do the research and to do the deep dives into themselves and to discover what they truly believe. It can be difficult to decide for yourself. What do you want? What do you feel? What do you believe? And it can be a comfort and an ease to have someone else tell you what you want and how you feel and what you believe. And if that serves in making you a better servant to and steward of and student of this environment that we are in, then that is all for the good. There is no right or wrong way to come into right relationship with yourself and with your community and with your society. However, it is not in right relationship with yourself, with your community, and with your surroundings to oppress and to destroy others for being different than you. We are bettered by our differences and by our diversity. We can learn from one another and we can create a more sustainable organism, right? Just like there are trees that can survive in northern climates and trees that can survive in volcanic climates and trees that can survive in temperate climates. If all trees were conifers, or all trees were deciduous, then trees would not be able to survive in all these different environments. So that, once again, what's true of life is true of life. Your faith and your belief and your spiritual practice should be diversified so that it is able to survive through a variety of circumstances, through a variety of environments. And so there is no value in abandoning your authentic beliefs and your authentic faith in favor of approval, because there is no external approval that you can gain by being a conifer who's stuck a maple leaf to your forehead and said, I'm a deciduous tree. Right? There's no approval that you can gain through acting and pretending that will make your heart feel like it is seen and it is known and it is genuinely appreciated and approved of. So that being said, ultimately it's a reality when you step away from the well-trodden path that people will tell you that you are lost, that people who are hiding and pretending and gluing leaves to their forehead to say that, yes, this is how I feel and what I believe, will look at you and tell you that you are lost. There's no one who will tell you that you are lost more than someone who is themselves lost. So it is a reality that there is a certain amount of opposition that you will feel when you choose to walk your own spiritual path that differs from that of your family or of your immediate community. But it is not a value in their dogma and in their literature for them to treat you in the way that they treat you, right? The prevailing faiths in my area teach that they should love their neighbors, that they should care for the needy and the homeless and the ailing and the sick and the mentally ill and those with differences, that we should welcome and love all beings. And yet there is a certain cognitive dissonance that tends to happen and tends to be the reality of things, where they would perceive you as the other and react with violence, whether that be literal physical violence or whether that be spiritual, psychological, and emotional violence, where they would attack you in your home or your place of business for your beliefs and project their own beliefs upon you as though their beliefs are true and right. And it is important to be humble and to recognize that when it comes to the numinous, when it comes to the liminal, when it comes to the spiritual, we have theory and we have faith and we have belief, but we don't have certainty. And we should not act upon things that we cannot be certain of. If you cannot be certain of what happens after we die, and spoiler alert, none of us can, then you should not do harm and do violence upon another being on that as the basis, right? You can choose to believe that if you do certain things and believe certain things, you will burn for eternity and your eternal soul will be punished forever. If that serves you, if you think that that is the world that we live in, then more power to you. However, you don't get to decide that for someone else, because that is not a certainty, that is a belief. And it is important to recognize the difference between certainty and belief, between truth and theory, between fact and fiction. It is very important to know the difference. You can believe in as many faith-based and Gnostic ideas as you would like, but acting upon them in where you intersect with other people, projecting your faith upon them and your belief upon them, does violence to them and knocks them from the seat of their power and their authenticity and their sovereignty, and says that it is the ultimate in hubris and it is the ultimate in arrogance to say that though we are all created in the same universe, you were created incorrectly and I was created perfectly and I can tell you how you should live your life. Is not the pathway to having a light heart. That is a crime that will have its due. It will have its repercussions. There have been interesting things throughout history that have played out in that regard, which I encourage you to become observant of and to view from the standpoint of a witness and observer, and try to remove yourself of your emotional bias. However, actionably, should you decide that dogma is not for you, that there is no one that stands between you and God, that there is no one that stands between you and source, that the infinite creative potential that birthed all things also birthed you and lives and breathes and moves within your being, that you do not require a go-between, you do not need a holy person to interpret for you how you should live your life, because ultimately, fundamentally, that compass lives within your own body. Should you choose to listen to your internal voice and find your own way and navigate through your own self towards what is right for you, and cast aside the people who are selling you absolution and selling you a easy fix for all the wrongs that you've done, that say that, yes, come here, I will place water and ash upon your forehead, and you are washed clean of all that you've done. You do not need to make it right. You do not need to make amends. You can simply pray for forgiveness. Forgiveness is wonderful, but it is not something that can be granted to you by the ethers. It can only be granted to you by right action. It can only be granted to you by following that pull from within your heart that says the right thing to do. Nobody else can give it to you, and nobody else can take it away. Nobody else can offer that to you, and you don't need somebody else to do that for you. Should you choose to walk that path, you have many, many options. And exploring them can be a powerful and wonderful and magical adventure all on its own. Take anything that anyone says and measure it by how it makes you feel in your heart, right? Is it liberating or constricting? Does it fill you with opportunity, inspiration, potential, and passion? Or does it fill you with shoulds and musts and have tos? Do you feel limited and confined by those beliefs? Or do you feel liberated and inspired by them? Are you enchanted? Are you fired up? Are you warmed? Are you loving in your faith? Or are you begrudging to your faith? Are you obligated to your faith? Are you depleted because of your faith? Is your faith forgiving toward you? Or does it condemn you? Does your faith heal you? Or does it tell you that you are broken? Are you doing your practice because it makes you feel complete? Or are you punishing yourself for being flawed and broken? You get to choose. No one else can choose for you. No one else can live your life on your behalf. No one else is with you at your birth and death in the liminal places. No one else goes to sleep in your mind space at night. No one else can feel the aches and the pains in your body. No one can feel the heaviness in your heart. No one carries the abandoned dreams and creations. No one else suffers when you no longer dance and make art and create. No one else suffers when you are not caring for yourself. Well, I suppose that part's not true. Other people, the people who love you, do suffer when you're not caring for yourself. But point being, no one else can feel what's going on inside of your body. And so you should not abandon what feels correct inside of your body in favor of anyone else. When you are doing what feels correct inside your body, well, then that helps other people. When you are caring adequately for yourself and being true to yourself and doing what's meaningful to you and what expresses what lights up your soul inside, that helps other people. That shines a light upon their life and upon their being. When you are making yourself small and diminishing yourself from fear of reprisal, fear of judgment, fear of punishment, fear of condemnation, or fear of persecution, well, then the world has one less radiant, magnificent light in it. It has one more lampshade covered in moths that no one can see and that lights no one's way. It spreads darkness in the world. It spreads darkness. So we get to choose. Are we spreading light? Or are we spreading darkness? Are we liberating ourselves? Or are we condemning others? There is no right and wrong. Those are value judgments, which we cast from our limited perspective in order to say, yes, this is mine and it is right and it is true, thus elevating our ego and our perspective. And that is bad and that is other and that is wrong and that is untrue, thus standing upon the shoulders of other people's perspectives. Things just are. Life and death coexist simultaneously in balance, and death serves life and life serves death. That which we breathe out, plants breathe in. That which we discard decays and is food and fuel for the mushrooms. There's no right and wrong. There just is. And there is, are we judging it or are we witnessing it, learning from it and accepting it? Are we rejecting aspects of ourself and aspects of the world that are essential, necessary parts that serve the world? All of it is intentional. All of it is necessary. None of it is wasted, including all of the pieces of you, right? Your heart is not more valuable than your large intestine just because your large intestine tends to handle the stink, right? Your doctors are not more valuable than the people who take your trash out, because if we're not removing waste, there's no doctor that can save you from the overrunning of that waste, right? Both are necessary to the healthful thriving of the organism. It's probably not the greatest metaphor in the world, but not all systems are the same, but each piece is an important part of the puzzle. It's not about making everything the same. It's not about having any correctness or right or wrong way. There's just an acceptance of who and what you are, and then finding the best way to be who and what you are in the world without allowing the world to tell you that it's wrong that you be that way, and that what is true for you needs to change in order to reflect what's true for someone else. A heart cell does not need to become a liver cell. That is a cancer that will destroy the organism. A society does not need to adopt the values of a different society in order to assimilate. That's indoctrination. That's oppression. It's genocide. It's xenophobia. Your faith and your belief is not any better or worse than anyone else's. And if it brings you peace, then feel free to talk about it, but understand that it may not be what is correct for someone else. So listen to people talk about their faiths, take what resonates and leave the rest, and ask yourself, what do you believe in? And pick the one that makes you feel light of heart, right? And understand that that is all that matters. And the rest of it is just noise, right? And stand tall and stand true in your own power and in your own sovereignty and in your own authenticity, regardless of anything that anyone else has to say, right? And try to remember that there is no right or wrong way to be you. Being you is always the correct way. Embrace your differences, embrace your diversity, be proud of who and what you are. See and witness and accept the light and dark aspects of yourself. Try not to reject anything in yourself. Try to approach the things that you despise and that disgust you and that you hate about yourself with curiosity and a desire to integrate them. What are you doing for me? What are you bringing to me? What purpose are you serving in my body and in my life? And how can I love and integrate you as the sacred piece of the ocean that you are? How can I not reject the aspects of myself that clean up the waste in the world as being somehow less valuable as those that bring in the clean air into the world? How do I accept that death is a necessary part of life, that it punctuates the ending and the beginning, and that it also always goes on to serve another form of life? How do I accept that all is in its correct measured amount, that though it may not seem fair to me that I am not up here, I'm down here? How can I be humble? How can I surrender control of these outcomes? And how can I respect these other systems enough to say that I don't know, and I haven't created this, and I am merely here and I am learning from it. And how can I feel good about what it is that I do and how it is that I am and how I show up in the world? And how can I feel light of heart? And how can I be sure that it's coming from my heart and not from my head? How can I be sure that it's coming from love and truth and not from fear, right? Be mindful and be aware of how you're feeling. Spend time in your body. Your body is sacred. Your body is a temple. Your body houses your spirit, informs your spirit. It takes in the good and lets go of the bad all the time from our surroundings and our environment. Let it tell you what is good for your spirit. Let it tell you what is good from your environment, and let it tell you what is poison and needs to be released. Let us cling not too tightly to that which we think, and let us know with a more aged and eternal knowing, the one that lives in our bones, the one that lives in our hearts, and the one that lives in our gut, the one that is accomplished at separating the good from the bad and the food from the poison. Let us not try to intellectualize that over much, because it might not make sense, because we are not on top of the world. We are not the gods of this planet. We are merely visitors upon it. Recent ones of that, children learning to walk, learning to run. And maybe we should approach with curiosity instead of certainty. Maybe we should approach with flow and surrender instead of force and control. Ultimately, may we all just know what works for us, do what works for us, and release the idea that we know what another should do and that we can force another to do as we wish. That being said, if you have found fault with any dogmas in your life, if you've said to yourself, well, that doesn't seem right, or, well, you say this, but you do that, let you just feel honored and feel sacred in that rebellion and in that difference that you have chosen. If you have decided to honor your truth and honor your authenticity at any point in time, at any point in time in your life, with or without recognition, with or without community support, with or without approval, I honor you, I respect you, and I see you. It is not difficult. It is not easy, or it is of grave difficulty to do what you know is in your heart is right when all others tell you otherwise. When you are facing ostracization, when you are facing being cut off from community and rejected or persecuted by those in your surroundings for doing what you know to be right in your heart for you, it is incredibly brave and courageous. And you deserve recognition and applause for that bravery and that courage. You are rising above centuries of oppression that have circumvented the authentic soul's truth, that have caused so much suffering, so much disease, so much decay, the termination of untold species, of habitats, of environments in the world. It's a grave sadness and a grave courage to walk away from it and to do differently, and to know that you may come after it just as much, just as deeply as some of these other things, and have the courage that there are divine forces that are absolutely on your side, that are whispering to you through those urgings in your soul and in your spirit that tell you what is right from wrong. They should always be heard more than any external voice sitting upon a die or at an altar telling you, yes, this is how you should be. This is what you should do. Make sure you donate all of your life's earnings in an estate and in a trust to this religious organization so that we may gild our spires and towers and build them upon the graves of any who would stand in our way. You can't always control everything. And part of sovereignty is releasing that need to control other things and having authority only over yourself. But the sovereign voice gets to vote with its actions, with its words. The sovereign voice gets to choose where to donate its value, whether that be your life energy or your time or your money. You get to decide where it goes. There is no one else who has higher authority over how you spend your time and how you spend your money and what you value than you. And so be conscious and be aware of where your vital energy is flowing, where your time, energy, and money is going, and understand what you are buying and what you are voting for with that time, energy, and money. Are you acting to support and sustain a status quo that is actively oppressing you? Or are you acting to support and sustain a future that will be different for our children and for generations to come? Are we radically rebelling against oppression? Are we radically rebelling against control? Or are we succumbing to what is easy, what is acceptable, what is done, walking across the well-laid path and securing for our future a repetition of our past? Or are we clearing away the debris that was intentionally placed to obscure our path so that it will become the well-laid path for our children and for our descendants? We get to choose. And are we honoring those paths that were painstakingly cleared by our ancestors? Had a moment as women in a women's circle to honor the ancestors that went before us, the women who fought and who died and who gave their lives and gave their life's energy to make sure that we have the right to assemble together as women, to the men and women who fought and died to ensure that we have the right to assemble as witches, that we have freedom of religion, and that freedom comes from persecution, that we are safer now today than we have ever been before to practice our faith. And put that call out there to practice it visibly, to practice it loudly, to assemble, to stand there and fly your flag in the face of oppression, to know that you can never be squashed, that you can never be obscured, that you can never be forced into a box, that however much others might like to control and homogenize the world, you are in it. And you are of it, and you are different, and you are here, and you will not be moved. So just know that I am inspired by you. I am here for you. I am here being tall and proud and shining my light and doing my work in the world. And I hope that if it ever resonates with you, that you take those pieces. And if anything that I've said or that I ever do say is not for you, feel free to discard it. I am not an apostle. I am not a prophet. I am not between you and God. You do not need my approval or my authority to differ from me or anything that I have to say. And in fact, I invite, welcome, and enjoy your different perspectives. I'm happy to share. I'm happy to learn. I'm happy to grow. And I love to incorporate and bring in new wisdoms and new traditions and new thoughts. Always a goal to be complete and to respect diversity, and never to project and oppress and persecute. So I hope today is a blessed day for you. I hope that you find joy in it. I hope that if you are surrounded by moths, you feel that it is well within your rights to burn a little brighter, to allow them to feel the fires that come as a consequence of them attempting to snuff out another's light and to consume another's light. May it encourage them to find the fire that lives within them instead of trying to take it from another. May you always be the rose with thorns, that your buds not be plucked before they have the opportunity to open. And may you be so bright and so brave today and all days.